Welcome to Walk, Don't Run to the Doctor, where we are helping people avoid the burdens of preventable disease. By using evidence-based lifestyle tools to unlock each person's intrinsic healing ability, we're going to be supporting healthy families, healthy communities, and healthy individuals. Making your own food and moving every day vigorously can help you gain freedom from health debt. We can prove it. Hello, I'm Miles Hassell, MD. I'm a physician in Portland, Oregon, and we're going to be talking today on the podcast Walk, Don't Run to the Doctor about cancer survivorship, and we'll also be talking a little bit about cancer prevention and the role of cooking at home in cancer survivorship. So what cancer survivorship refers to is when you have cancer, what will improve your outcomes? And outcomes can be measured by survival, recurrence rates for the cancer, and also side effects from conventional cancer therapy. Because as you listen to Walk, Don't Run to the Doctor, don't be under the impression that we're anti-medicine, because we're not. We're conventionally trained physicians and nurses here who take care of people, but we also recognize that the better that patients take care of themselves, the less they need us. And so in a case of if you have cancer or a loved one has cancer, the question is, what do you do? What do you do for yourself? Or are you just purely a pawn of the medical system, as some people sort of see themselves? And it can be overwhelming, worrisome, and the treatment itself can be a struggle. And then after treatment is finished, what do you do then? And so if this applies to you or somebody you love, then we can talk about many aspects, but one of them is what you can do with lifestyle. And in today's episode, we'll be talking in particular, what can you do with the food that you provide? And so when you approach having cancer, then your healthcare team, you might have chemotherapy and surgery and radiation and immunotherapy and things like that. And in addition, you have your own choices to make to prevent cancer recurrence, to improve survival, and to reduce treatment side effects. And what we see is that lifestyle medicine is an integral part of cancer treatment. It's not just a nice idea. It's not just something that distracts the patient or keeps them busy while the real medical stuff is pursued. Lifestyle medicine is real medicine, and in many cases, it can be even the most important part of your intervention. But at the very least, it's an important part. And that's because the reduction in recurrence rates, improvement in survival, and reduction in side effects. We can also think about all the other beneficial side effects for the cancer survivor. Is good lifestyle choices will also reduce their risk of heart disease and stroke and diabetes and depression, other aspects of mental illness, joint disease. And when we put all that together, we say, well, this is really worthwhile. It really makes a difference to your outcomes. And when we're talking about lifestyle, what are we talking about? And it's a huge area. The first step is eating whole food that you make yourself, and we'll be talking about the reasons why that is the case. It includes foods from all traditional food groups, so it's not a highly limited diet. And so we would say fresh fruits and vegetables, whole grains and beans, healthy fats, proteins, probiotic foods. That means foods with active cultures. Avoiding highly processed foods. In previous podcasts, you've heard us talk about how highly processed foods are associated with worse health outcomes across just about every spectrum of disease. Moving every day, including resistance exercises, preferably some of the time spent outdoors, preferably some of the time spent in the sunlight. Watching your weight. Being too chubby definitely seems to increase your risk of just about everything, including cancers, and interferes with the quality of cancer outcomes from conventional treatment. Prioritizing your sleep. There's other areas we could talk about, for example, heat, like hot baths and saunas and things like that as well. But those are the key aspects that you should pay attention to. And so today we're going to be talking about whole food made in your kitchen, including all the normal food groups, including plenty of fruits and vegetables. If you look at any of the organizations that give cancer recommendations, I think it's fair to say that all of them refer to healthy diet, healthy exercise, and weight control as being really important. And if we try to nail down the numbers that you look for to say how important is this, then you can go to organizations like the AICR, which is American Institute for Cancer Research, which is a continuously updated website that's really useful, aicr.org. You can look at individual studies, and we'll be talking about the EPIC studies, which is one of the big international observational studies that speak a lot to the issue of lifestyle and health outcomes, including cancer. And if you go to our website, which is greatmed.org, you'll see more information on this. But overall, if you look at the populations that prioritize food, you can see a reduction in risk of dying from any cause, as well as cancer-specific death, and in patients with cancer, by somewhere in the 20 to 30% region is the kind of numbers that show up most frequently. Some of the numbers go as high as close to 40%. But 20 to 30% risk reduction for all-cause mortality and cancer-specific recurrence are commonly seen in these studies. And just to put in that perspective, that is very, very competitive in terms of degree of benefit with any of our other cancer treatments. So don't suggest to yourself that that's not very important. That's actually a huge benefit. These interventions with lifestyle also reduce non-cancer disease, like we talked about, like heart disease and diabetes, improves fatigue and well-being, better mental health through cancer therapies, improved healing after surgery, and reduced side effects from chemotherapy and radiation, for example. So patients who take better care of themselves can actually tolerate conventional medicine better. And so it's a win-win for the patient. When we ask which diet is the best, then the literature is fairly strong on omnivorous diets. So if you sort of think of diets as covering this huge spectrum, so at one end are the highly restrictive diets, things like vegan, sometimes people would call that plant-based, vegetarian, keto, paleo, the restrictive diets that don't include all traditional food groups, and then go from that extreme to the more middle-of-the-road group, which are the omnivorous whole food diets, in which all traditional food groups are included, and we would tend to use the Mediterranean model within that. And it's possible that all whole food traditional diets work well, but the Mediterranean style model, which is very, very unrestricted and therefore easy to follow, has the best outcomes overall. But one of the interesting aspects within that is the idea that the patients who cook their own food at home seem to do better. And one of the things that's often overlooked, especially in the Mediterranean diet models, and many of these models, the Lyon-Hart study is one of the good examples, the patients were actually instructed in terms of home cooking to meet this model. And so that's worth remembering that at another extreme is people who eat a lot of processed foods. And that can be frozen meals, a lot of baked goods, a lot of highly processed, ready-to-eat meals, protein powders, all these kinds of things. And those, sometimes called ultra-processed foods, are commonly associated with worse health outcomes across just about every aspect of health. Cancer, heart disease, stroke, diabetes, obesity, mental health. And so constantly coming back to this idea that if you're going to eat well, you probably need to cook your own food. And if you're going to select a diet that has the most evidence for improving your outcomes, improving your survival, improving your cancer outcomes, then we would recommend going to the Mediterranean diet model. If you look at some of the big epidemiologic studies or even the randomized control trials, once again, I'd refer to the Lyon-Hart trial in this regard, then we see like a 60% reduction in cancer rates over 4 years in the Lyon-Hart trial. In things like the Nurses' Health Study, where they looked at a more general healthy diet approach, something they called a healthy eating index, those also saw something in the region of a 60% reduction in cancer incidence in that population, as well as substantial reductions in heart disease, stroke, and diabetes. So we have a broad range of studies that all seem to point to the same omnivorous diet model. And arguably, the Mediterranean diet model has the best evidence. So we're talking fruits, vegetables, beans, grains, fish, poultry, red meat, nuts, legumes, if I haven't already mentioned those, dairy foods, the whole mix, which is really a lot easier way to eat. The things that I think all the literature kind of agrees on is that highly processed foods, so that's foods manufactured outside of your home, are definitely suspect. And most of the studies seem to reflect the idea that minimizing added sugars, sugary foods, sweet drinks, desserts, probably should be minimized, and that's pretty consistent. We would actually add to that probably minimizing foods made with flour, because flour foods, so that we're talking about breads, pastries, pastas, act very similar to sugar in your body, in your metabolism. And so although the diet literature is less clear cut on this in this regard, then lowering the glycemic index of your diet through getting rid of foods made with flour is probably a really prudent move as well. One other component that really does look like it matters, that's probably the main specific food for which we can see evidence for benefit, is actually extra virgin olive oil. It appears that extra virgin olive oil in and of itself probably has some significant anti-cancer properties that go beyond that of just the plain old Mediterranean diet. So, and we don't know any other oil that has shown up in the literature as having protective qualities with respect to cancer. It's very likely that we'll find that coconut oil, which is another traditional oil, what we might call virgin coconut oil or crude coconut oil, the unprocessed coconut oil, may have similar benefits. There's some biochemical plausibility to that. But if you're going to bet your life on something, I would include extra virgin olive oil as your main kitchen fat. And when that isn't appropriate, we use butter in our household. If you look at, for example, the data from the EPIC studies, one of the big things that showed up there was raw fruits and vegetables. And we come up with this number of about 500 grams a day, somewhere in north of a pound a day, as another individual metric that's associated with reducing overall mortality as well as cancer-related mortality. And so when you're thinking about menu planning, we're going to be talking about this in a second, but think about having fruits or vegetables with every meal and snack. And I think a person can include both cooked and raw in that regard, because when you cook vegetables, you liberate certain compounds, you destroy certain other ones. And so the fact that traditionally humans have eaten cooked vegetables commonly is probably an important aspect, so that we'd recommend both raw and cooked. What we don't see is a basis for saying don't eat animal proteins. And we do know that eating animal proteins, that's fish, meat, chicken, tend to have better muscle mass, better mood, better energy. And so we would include those, even though the effect on cancer itself appears to be neutral. However, we do see fish as probably being associated with lower overall cancer mortality, whereas other animal proteins appear to be neutral. In the EPIC study, as with so many other studies, we do see soft drinks and fruit juice as being associated with increased mortality from some cancers. And the evidence overall, once again, against concentrated sweets is pretty strong. Whole grains and beans, lentils, also seem to be associated with improved outcomes, and they're actually a very useful source of protein as well. And so if we were going to sort of say, hey, you or your loved ones might be overwhelmed by this whole idea of lifestyle medicine and their cancer therapy, and how can we sort of simplify this? How can we keep this from being overwhelming? Think of a little checkoff list. And the checkoff list for us would start with fruits or vegetables with every meal and snack, so that your entire diet is built around fruits and vegetables, to which you add other things. Include some protein with every meal and snack, and that can be whole grains and beans and meat and fish and dairy and eggs. Have some probiotic foods almost every day, and that's things like yogurt and kefir and fresh sauerkraut. Healthy fats. So the number one that stands out in our reading the literature is extra virgin olive oil, but also oil seeds like pumpkin seeds and sunflower seeds and flaxseed meal, dairy fats. So we would actually prefer to have whole fat dairy for a variety of reasons rather than skim milk dairy. Have very little food processed at home, and all of this means that you need to do some planning. So the question to ask yourself right now is, have you planned your food for tomorrow? And you can keep it really simple. Our book, Good Food, Great Medicine, has recipes that's intended to be really simple to do. Recipes that lend themselves to leftovers. And so everything from stir fries to meatloaf to stews and casseroles, all those kinds of things can really reduce your burden of cooking. But it all does take planning. Remember that there's a big difference between food that somebody else has prepared for you in an industrial facility and food made at home. And so if this is overwhelming to you, maybe you have friends or relatives that you can rope in and help take some of the burden of food preparation, and just sort of give them a guideline as to how you want to eat, which is whole foods cooked at home, and then let them at it. But by all means, do tell them what you enjoy. But avoid the highly processed ingredients. Avoid industrially processed foods. And sometimes you might be traveling. When we travel, we carry a cutting board with us, a chef's knife, a fry pan, and a cooking pot, and a hot plate. And when you do that, it's amazing how, with a little bit of imagination, or sometimes a lot of imagination, depending on what's available locally, you can actually cook some really good meals with this minimal equipment. And an example of that would be stir fries with just meat, maybe some cheese, vegetables, salt, pepper, healthy oils, and make huge batches of that kind of thing. And you can eat well, and you also save just a ton of money. When you come to menu planning, we have a whole section on menu planning in our book, Good Food, Great Medicine, which is for 4th edition. And don't overlook, I mentioned earlier, roping in your friends and family. When you think of food as an integral part of a healthy diet, think of it as an integral part of healthy culture as well. And so cooking together with friends and family brings more community, brings more cheer, and, as I said, saves money. So the good choices you're going to make in terms of food choices, exercise, sleep, weight management will, we think we can confidently say, improve outcomes from cancer, reduce side effects from cancer therapies, as well as, once you're through your cancer, improving your mental health, heart disease and stroke risk, diabetes, dementia, overall well-being, overall healing, overall resilience, overall ability to avoid the next flu that comes along. And also has a beneficial effect on all of your friends and family, because as you take better care of yourself, everybody around you is going to probably take a little bit better care of themselves as well. You're going to motivate others. So what does planning ahead look like? Well, it means you ask yourself, what am I going to have for breakfast tomorrow? What am I going to have for lunch tomorrow? What am I going to have for my evening meal tomorrow? For me, the breakfast is almost always either a cooked whole grain cereal, or what we call crap pot cereal, with berries and nuts, or a couple of eggs fried with some vegetable, typically tomatoes or spinach. And that's kind of easy. We sometimes have other things, but that covers most of my breakfast. Most of my lunches are going to be leftovers from dinner. So it'll be some kind of protein, some kind of vegetable, probably some bean or grain as well. If I have snacks, even a little smoothie with some yogurt and kefir and berries. It might be a banana and a handful of nuts, things like that. But it's all thought out ahead of time. It's not, oh no, I'm hungry. Now what do I do? Instead, it's all thought out. The food's around. When I'm really desperate and I can't think of anything else, I might just eat tuna out of a can. Filling, healthy, and very satisfying. So maybe you're going through cancer therapy and you've got some bad days and some better days. Maybe right now they're all bad days. This is the time to rope in friends and family. Have them help you cook some casseroles, cook some soups, stews, chilies, things like that you can put in the freezer and have them ready for the next for the next day, for the next week. And make big batches of things, big batches of a stir fry, and make plenty of flavor. Have plenty of flavor in those. Don't hesitate to use the salt and pepper and any other flavors you like. Because what you don't want to do is have foods that you don't like at times like that. As you listen to us talk about diet, for example, it may sound pretty repetitive, and that's because it pretty much is. It's really amazing how the same approaches that would help you reverse diabetes are very close to the same approaches you might use for osteoarthritis, even osteoporosis, and are going to be very, very similar to that you'd use for heart disease and cancer and stroke and dementia risk reduction. So although we mostly talked about diet today, this diet approach covers a lot of territory, and it's one of the important components at other times we're going to be talking about, for example, using healthy exercise for cancer risk reduction and cancer survivorship as well. You have a tremendous amount of control over your cancer therapy because you are in control of the lifestyle component. And the lifestyle component will help your outcomes, reduce your side effects, improve your tolerance of conventional therapy. It's not an either or. It's throw everything you've got at your cancer, and let's see how we can make you able to beat it. So I'm Miles Hassell, MD, internal medicine in Portland, Oregon. The website is greatmed.org. The book is Good Food, Great Medicine, now in its 4th edition. And the podcast you're listening to is Walk, Don't Run to the Doctor, which is available on most podcast platforms.